please welcome Elinor Lipman. Lipman is the award-winning author of 17 books of fiction, 16, I'm sorry, and nonfiction, including The Inn at the Lake Devine, Isabel's Bed, I Can't Complain, all 2 personal essays, On Turpentine Lane, Rachel to the Rescue, and Miss Demeanor. A finalist for the Thurber Prize for American Humor, her first novel, Then She Found Me, was adapted into a film directed by and starring Helen Hunt with Bette Midler, Colin Firth, and Matthew Broderick. Lipman was a 2011 and 2012 Elizabeth Drew Professor of Creative Writing at Smith College and divides her time between Manhattan and Hudson Valley. This is what a review said about her book. In the delightfully reassuring rom-com tradition of Nora Ephron, the perennially mood-lifting Lipman is equally revered for her lovable characters, spitfire wit, and happily ever after romantic escapades. So please, let's all welcome her tonight.
Thank you. You know, I don't know if I really, do you think I can read without this? So I'll have 2 hands to read? Sure. We'll try that. Okay. Uh-oh. I'll give it a try, and then if I'm not loud enough. Okay. Oh, so I'm not going to just dive right in with the reading. I always start, I've lost count of how many times I've been to Politics and Prose. This is my first time at this store, brand new. But it all started with, did any of you know Carla Cohen, the founder? And I have 3, oh, that's good. We got you, no worries. Sorry about that, guys. A hands-free experience. Okay, good. Okay, how's that? Can you hear me without leaning into it like an old lady? Okay. So I have 3 short Carla Cohen stories. One was when my first book came out, Then She Found Me, and then it came out in paperback. And Carla wrote to my editor, and she said that she'd hand-sold over like 300 copies of the paperback. I was so new with this that I had never even heard hand-sold as a verb before. And I didn't quite know what it meant. It meant that people would come in this store and she'd recommend it. And then my second Carla story is one of my first readings on not exactly a tour, but it was my second novel and they didn't send you around. But I came to Washington and it was some sort of like living room-ish place in, I think, this store, and it was like a living room. And it had, so it was 2 armchairs, and I sat in one and read, and Carla sat in the other and one next to me and faced the audience and laughed. And, like, it was all it was very nice. And then the last time, which is, I think, I don't know, does anyone know how long ago Carla died? Well, let's say it was at least 5 years ago. But my last reading here with Carla, her introduction, it was just the most touching introduction ever. It was a letter to me. So she got up and read this, like, Dear Elinor, the first time, or this is what it's meant to me. And it was just, unforgettable, obviously. So I'm going to read, like, 3, not in a row, 3 short sections from the book, not to give too much away, because things happen in this book that I don't want to reveal, because they're all, it's like going toward that. But so this is about Emma, and she was handed the reins of her parents' estate sale business. And she's doing it reluctantly. So I'm going to just start with that, just like one page from page 1. My new business card reads, A State of Mind, and below, in italics, we empty your nest. Though I've been working alone since my parents retired, I've retained the we for sentimental reasons and to sound less like the one-woman operation I hope to keep afloat. I've been estate sale adjacent since I could add and give change, spending weekends at a table, wrapping and bagging purchases. If buyers tried to negotiate, I'd point to the stated price on the tag or sticker and ask blankly, do you not want it? But the grown-up me has learned to be kinder and more psychiatric. I know when to handhold and when to hard sell. Some clients can tell a story about every item in their house if I let them, and sometimes I do. If anyone is convinced that the unsigned portrait over the fireplace is an old master, I don't argue. I let the small local auction house with which I have a relationship, I recommend them, they recommend me, be the bad guy. As ever, they agree that the work in question is either NSV, no sale value, or TFO, the frame only. Yes, I can get $100 for decent still life by an unknown artist, but it's small comfort to the surviving children who grew up expecting that their inherited treasures would be auctioned off for millions. I wish I could say that no two houses are alike, but Harrow, Massachusetts has several subdivisions where only the paint colors differentiate one property from another. Inside, there are a few surprises. I know what the big city apartment-dwelling beneficiaries won't want. The gas grill, the Weber grill, the porch furniture, the fireplace tools, the lawnmowers, the rakes, the snow shovels, the hedge clippers, the left-handed golf clubs, and warped tennis rackets, the recalled playpen, the crib bumpers, the furry toilet seat covers, and crocheted tissue box holders, the DVDs, the cassette tapes, the VHS tapes, the college textbooks, the shag rugs, the sewing machine, the electric typewriters, the souvenirs bought at airport gift shops, the aluminum saucepans, the empty mayonnaise jars. I'm proud of our excellent Yelp reviews complimenting our bedside manner and my parents' talent for curing a lifetime of buyer's regret. One written salute to their Midas touch is now reproduced on my invoices. Still, it's not my calling. The accolades don't stop me from thinking, just one more summer, just one more sale. So, people always ask where I got the idea, as if it was like a very big, grand plot. But it was just that I do go to estate sales, not chronically, but on weekends I'm in the Hudson Valley of New York. So if I'm lucky in the summer, there's 2 over the course of the summer. But I do go, and the last one I went to, it was. It was at a lovely home, and a lovely old home that was, just beautiful. And there were so many things that I liked, not big things, but this plate that I use a lot for, hors d'oeuvres, and 2 matching soup bowls, and another one that, is like for dip. And something that really struck me, it was a mug for the Forward, the Jewish newspaper. And it started off as historically the Yiddish newspaper. And I got that, and I use it frequently. And it, made me feel this relationship, the mezuzah on the door, to this woman that I didn't know. So that sounds like it's going to be a plot, but it wasn't, because when I was just sort of driving around thinking about the plot for the next book, I thought maybe she'll discover something, some relationship to this family. No, that didn't happen. But I still liked the idea. I thought there was potential for a woman who owned an estate sale business. It's not easy, and also it wasn't her calling. And her parents gave her the business because she just worked some retail jobs in Framingham, Massachusetts after college, and this was in Harrow, Massachusetts, which is a thinly disguised Northampton where I lived for, 20-something years. So, I just take it, just one sentence at a time, and then, let's see. So because her parents, they thought she needed a job, and along with that, they sort of handed over their house because the mortgage was paid, and they very conveniently said, well, we're retiring. They didn't really mean it, but they did. They got a condo in Buzzards Bay on Cape Cod. And so they move away. We see them again. They're in constant touch, and they do come back in the book. But they suggest that she, to help with the expenses, the taxes and other expenses, that she get a boarder. They get a boarder. And they've got that all lined up because it's her father's best friend from Harrow High School. They were both in the math department. So that is Frank, and Frank is in his early 60s and really like a salt of the earth in the way that a, male high school teacher. Does anybody here a teacher? Anybody a teacher? Oh, Susie. Okay. Yes. Anyway, so Frank, salt of the earth. So the next thing I'm going to read is, that Frank has moved in, and Frank has moved in, and right from the get-go, she knew this was a good idea because he takes the bins to the curb, knows when, trash is, and he, sets the time on the on the coffee maker, how it's always like 12 o'clock, and knows something she didn't even know about, which was to empty that slot underneath the toaster with the crumbs in it. So anyway, so she feels like it's a very good idea. Okay, so I'm just going to read you, what did I do? Oh, I know, I just turned the page down. Let me find it. Here we go. Oh, one other thing about Frank. I told you he was a teacher in the border. He's a new-ish widower. But it's not mourning all that much because his wife was quite the tyrant, and adds a little drama because before the book opened, she was struck by lightning on the golf course and died. So got rid of her before it ever opened. But it also made him, that we learn more and more about Ginger, the way. Okay, so midweek, following a middling sale on Fairgrove, the doorbell startled me awake. Who'd be visiting at 8:30 a.m.? Hearing muted but companionable-sounding exchanges, I knew that Frank was up and tending to it. A friend of his, I figured? No need to rush downstairs, other than curiosity and the smell of the cinnamon that Frank always added to our oatmeal. I dressed, brushed teeth and hair, went downstairs and found a uniformed policeman seated at the kitchen table. Unsmiling, he half rose, nodded formally, sat down. As one of Harrow's 3 police officers, Luke Winooski was known by all. Everyone, including me, had gone to school with a Winooski sibling or cousin. But this wasn't the Luke I'd graduated with. Once a chubby redhead who played drums in the HHS orchestra and marching band, he'd returned from the police academy and a decade on the Worcester force, fit and nearly unrecognizable. "What's up?" I asked with an involuntary check of his left hand. "It isn't social, I'm afraid," Frank explained. "Chief Winooski is here on police business." Was it about Frank? Surely not anything that would make me wonder how clueless I'd been to open my door to a criminal. "Does he need a lawyer?" I asked. Luke smiled, a fleeting relief, except that he was now saying, "No, but you might." Surely he was joking. I smiled. "Emma," said Frank, "we weren't supposed to be selling alcohol at the Moriartys." "What alcohol?" I asked. "The spumante," said Frank. Luke added, "and reportedly a bottle of peach wine." "That's what brought you here, a bottle of peach wine?" I asked. "You need a license to sell alcohol," he said. Taking issue with sell, I explained how we practically gave it away. I said we designed groupings, maybe with wine glasses, a corkscrew, an apron. Once in a while, if I found an unopened bottle. "Did someone buy this grouping?" Luke asked. I looked at Comptroller Frank, who nodded. "You need a license to sell beer and alcohol," Luke repeated. We got a complaint. I asked if it was a local, state, or federal crime. "You need a license to sell beer and alcohol," Luke repeated. We got a I already said that. "It's a town ordinance, not my call." Frank said, "We won't do it again, Chief. We'll consider this a warning." He was signaling something to me, nodding toward the table. I interpreted this as, don't just stand there, join us. I asked Luke if he'd like some oatmeal, which he declined. Mind if I finish it, I asked Frank, wooden spoon poised over the pot. All yours, he said. Maple syrup, milk, spoon, napkin. I took my time, then sat down. Frank cooks it with a stick of cinnamon, I announced. He's always up first. Oatmeal on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Frank added. Otherwise toast, or I scramble an egg. After a few moments, Luke asked, new color behind his freckles, how long have you two been living together? Frank raised his hand in the manner of, full stop, let me answer that. I'm a boarder here. Emma's father and I were colleagues and friends. Of course you know Ginger died. And to me, Ginger's caddy called 911. An ambulance came, and so did Luke. I missed that, I said. I was living in Framingham at the time. You and Luke were in the same class at HHS, said Frank. Surely you knew that. I said, of course. And he moved back to replace Chief Mankoff. Lucky for all of us. Lucky? I repeated. Frank glanced at Luke. I'll leave it at bent cop. Is that unfair? We'll leave it at he had a heart attack, said Luke. Then to me, you need to get your van inspected. Your sticker expired at the end of last month. I said I'd take care of that today. Thanks for noticing. Then, hoping to sound enthusiastic about the municipality that employed him, I said, it's nice being back. As you obviously know, I took over the family business. She's introduced a lot of new features, said Frank. Finally, a laugh from Luke. So I've heard, he said. So you might have guessed, because of the way she looked at his left hand, maybe, and that he looks different. At the end of that chapter, which I didn't read, he stands up and she said, well, you know, I didn't know you were this tall. And he said, you missed my growth spurt. But that takes a while. And when my editor first got the manuscript, she thought it was too fast. And even when I turned it in, I was worried about that. I thought maybe she might, if there was going to be an objection, I mean, not that I might be due other objections, but I was worried about that too. So she very nicely said, it was too easy, it happened too fast. So I thought, well, how can I slow this down? So I give the, suggestion of, did he have a girlfriend that, oh, good. Maybe I'd throw in the suggestion of a girlfriend back in Worcester. But then I thought, I know what I'll do. They went to high school together. I'll make up a 15th reunion committee. And they'll both be on the 15th reunion committee, but they will be, she'll be keeping her distance because she's already has a girlfriend. So that was kind of fun, and that keeps reappearing and right sort of till the end of the book. But then I had to actually put people on that committee. So that created new characters, and one of them was but the introduction mentioned about I was a finalist for the James Thurber Award, and when I was out there in Columbus, that was in May, then there were some other people who were finalists, and we went around at lunch, around the table, and where did they come from? And one of them was from a family in Massachusetts, where I was from and where my book takes place, and from a family they owned a chain of funeral homes. So I said to him, I'm just at this point in the next novel where I need someone to recommend a funeral home. So what's the name of your funeral home? And he said it was Cohane, which is a really good Massachusetts name, a nice Irish Massachusetts name. So I put Cohane in the book. And then I figured, well, I'll put Joe Cohane, the funeral director, on the committee. So that's the way I kind of write, with seat in my pants. And so the big plot turn, or the thing that takes over the book, really, is that Emma gets a recommendation. In fact, it's Luke's mother, just neighbor, not because anything's happened yet, who has seen a for sale sign on the nicest street in Harrow, Massachusetts, on Quail Ridge Road. And so she just tells Frank, who's her friend, to tell Emma there's a for sale sign. And if a house is for sale, can an estate sale be far behind? So she figures out who lives there, and she calls the family. So the woman, Lois Mankoff, same name as the bent cop, who's the police chief who was run out of town. So it takes a while and some negotiation. So this is a phone call where Emma is on the phone with Lois Mankoff and her daughter Vanessa, who is maybe about 40, and they're a tough cookie on her own. So let me see if there's anything else I need to tell you before I get there. I don't think so. Okay. So on the phone. A request, or was it a test, put forth by daughter Vanessa in the promised determinative phone call. We need you to burn the contents of the file cabinet in the bow parlor. Bow parlor, burn. I dealt with plenty of file cabinets, one of the reasons I owned a dolly, but I'd never been asked to set fire to anyone's possessions. I assume you've gone through this paperwork and know there's nothing valuable left behind, I asked. When my question met with silence, I continued. I mean, things like birth certificates, insurance policies, wills. I found savings bonds that the clients had never cashed. Vanessa asked, is burning things such a big deal? Hoping this would be all the disincentive required, I said, I don't have a fireplace or a wood stove, and considering the town's outdoor burn bans, I'm afraid it is a big deal. The master bedroom has a working fireplace, said her mother on speaker. Though I could surely find a way to burn any unwanted papers, the task had a dodgy ring to it. Was it Lois herself who was giving me a law-breaking vibe? What if this was evidence? What if her ex used his home file cabinet for confidential Harrow police files? What if destroying their files meant I was perverting the course of justice? Skipping a good deal. Okay. After a few beats, Vanessa said, okay, Mom ran an escort service. So if you're asking if business was conducted, the answer is yes. And every single customer was top tier. Millionaires, doctors, ministers, CEOs, CFOs, said Lois. Lola Mansfield was a brand. Lola Mansfield is synonymous with the best, the cream of the crop. Lois was suddenly Lola. Couldn't you just lock up the file cabinet? It's as easy as taping a sign on it, not for sale, do not open, I asked. Lois said, yes, forget we asked, and to her daughter, tell her what we were famous for. What did we make our reputation on? Discretion, said Vanessa. Out of my hands then, good. Is she still on, Vanessa asked her mother. I might have volunteered to hang up so they could talk freely, but I was too enthralled to withdraw. Please know that everything we've discussed is off the record, I said. Don't go overboard, said Lois. Use whatever will help bring in the most customers. I'm proud of my worker bees. I loved every single one. Beauty and brains, and it went both ways. Men of the highest caliber. It was the best job ever. At my phoniest and most flattering, I answered, wow, how many of us can say that? It's inspiring. Lois said, I didn't have a college degree. I didn't have anything to put on a resume besides housewife, mother, hostess. These were the happiest years of my life. Happiest, I wondered, as in happiest hooker? Why not ask at this point? Were you one of those worker bees? As a demi-mondaine? Ha! Thank you, but no. What did that leave? Were you the madam? I asked. And then, as if it were the most logical and obvious job one could perform at a brothel, Lola Mansfield said proudly, "I was the house mother." So that all happens by page 52. So she hasn't seen the house yet. And her first visit, Manny, the bent cop, fancies himself an artist, too. So as you walk in, there are murals on one side, and, more murals on both sides, and other things. Like there's a stairway to heaven, and he's painted lipstick kisses all the way up. So, and then when you bring poor Frank back, the retired high school math teacher, it's quite a shock to his system, but he's such a good egg. So that's the big get. That's their big opportunity. This could be the most money, not only that she ever made, but that her parents ever made after years in business. So that was kind of fun to do that. There's a lot of brothel in here. Scared the guy away over there. Anyway, but I'm not going to read anymore unless you say you have to. I'm not going to do that. But, it's so much fun to just talk to people. If you have any questions about anything, any books, anything like that. Yes?
So I know you said you write by the seat of your pants because the editor said something and then you wrote in these other characters. When you start a book, do you have an idea of how you want it to end, or does it just is a living thing?
Well, in the sense that it's a Lipman novel, I know it has a happy ending. So that part, and often, like, as you know, Shakespeare comedies all end with a wedding. So, not to give too much away, but I don't. So, I with this, I can't even remember exactly. It started with, that Emma is talking about this business that she started, and I wasn't even quite sure, what the situation was with the parents yet, and then I decided it would be fun to make it her a reluctant. And she's, her self-esteem is, she has a couple of degrees, some online degrees in writing, and so Frank is always encouraging her to, do other things, and, but it's, Kurt Vonnegut said about writing, he said he feels like an armless, legless man with a crayon in his mouth, and that's, so it's very much experimentation. So I'll think, what's going to happen tomorrow, meaning me tomorrow at the desk and them in the book. And then I think, yes, good idea. I can see keeping this in and pursuing this. And that's, I think it was Bernard Malamud who said, no surprise for the author, no surprise for the reader. So I feel like the process is legit, that I can just, play it by ear. And I think I'm a very strict self-editor. I'm constantly editing, cutting it down, cutting lines. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
I noticed with great interest your several references in this book to things like the statutory scheme of Massachusetts legal policy, and I'm wondering how much research do you do to both get it right, and how much digging do you have to do as you write to bring in information that you probably didn't know off the top of your head?
Right, like that prostitution was merely a misdemeanor in Massachusetts. It's definitely on a need-to-know basis. So I'll write something and think, I better look that up, and I'll Google it. But there's Luke, being the chief of police, and her friend. I have a friend that I grew up with, in Lowell, Massachusetts. I've known him since 4th grade. Jimmy Mulligan thanked him in the acknowledgments as James. And in the last, and I think almost all of my books going back to Ms. Demeanor, I've had a cop in some form or other. And Jimmy, my friend, was everything from a cop on the beat to captain and superintendent and whatever the top is, chief of police, and did some time at FBI Academy. So in this, it's not even the legal stuff, but just about Luke just sort of going to someone's house, gets on a call, and of course, the point of view is Emma's, so it's not as if he's having business that I don't see, because Emma is my point of view. But if something's happening and Emma's seeing it and I can report on it, I ran there isn't a line or an action by the cop that wasn't run by Jimmy Mulligan. So sometimes it's just a quick question. I email him, he's in New Hampshire, or when it gets down to, as it's getting finished, I add up, page number, this line, to run it all by Jimmy. And he often has a little edit. It's, just things like a cop stopping traffic at the end of the block because maybe something's going on, someone's sick and there's an ambulance, even to tell me he's not going to let anyone through, but yeah, one police cop is enough, but he'd let them in afterwards after the, ambulance left. So he's really great at procedure. So it helps me. And so far I haven't, I don't think I've ever heard about, a police, anyone complaining about getting something wrong. One thing with Ms. Demeanor, my last book, my character is under house arrest. And sometimes people would say, would she really get house arrest? Would the judge really throw the book at her because of the charge was public indecency. She had sex on the roof of her building that a neighbor saw through binoculars. And so I said, well, first of all, it's the reason the acknowledgments, there's this thing, the galley that comes out first, and usually the acknowledgments comes out just in the hardcover. But with that book, I had the acknowledgments comes out right away because I wanted everyone to see the number of lawyers I consulted and a judge, so that they wouldn't question my... And Jimmy Mulligan was the one that said, I said, I need something that would get her house arrest, that we should get arrested for, but wouldn't be, you wouldn't call it white collar crime, but something that would not be an unsympathetic crime. And I said, does that really happen about people, having sex in public? And he said, he said, I can't tell you when I was a cop on the beat where you just knock on the car window, and say, go home, go home. Yes?
With all that's happening politically today, do you see your next novel bringing that in?
No.
Part of the
No. Because, my 2 books ago, Rachel to the Rescue, it had Donald Trump on every page. And I loved it. I loved that book. And when I told my agent what I was writing about, great, and my editor, and then when she left, the next editor who took over, then when I finished it, everyone was like, oh, it's so funny, it's so typical, the Lipman. Yet, I had never had a book turned down. Notice how I whisper, never had a book turned down. And the editor said the same thing, which was when, it's right before the 2020 election, and it would, if he got elected, that would, in 2020, that could be a problem. Well, but if he didn't get elected, people would have Trump fatigue. So what I did was, on my own for that book, I wrote to my British editor, and about 2 weeks later, he wrote me back and said, okay, I want to publish this book. this was like September 29th. He wanted to have the ebook ready on October 16th, which I happen to remember because it's my birthday, and then have the print edition out on the American election day, November 4th. So they did that, and then it got, people wrote nice things on Amazon, and there were nice reviews, and so my American editor said, "Okay, we'll do it now. We'll do it now." So, but no, I wouldn't do that. Although, well, Jonathan, my significant other, he's convinced that Rachel to the Rescue will have its day. He thinks it'll have its day. Yeah. Yes.
Are there any characters that you would like to revisit from any of your past novels?
Usually I say no, but for the first time ever, the book I just started, it's a sequel to The Inn at Lake Devine. Yes. I know. My old editor, my wonderful first editor, Stacy Schiff, when I told her that I was going to do this, she said, "It's the gateway drug." It's the gateway drug. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. When I say that, and people think it wasn't my first novel, but it's usually often the first book of mine that people have read. So thank you for that.
Well, I'll ask my question next. Yes, that was the first. That was the first Elinor Lipman that I read, and have read it probably about 16 times. Just can't stop myself. Kelly and I here couldn't help but notice that this is the second time we've seen you in DC at Politics and Prose on Valentine's Day. And we were just curious if there was any significance to why you are here on Valentine's Day.
No, I think it was, the timing was good. The pub date of the book was last Tuesday. And it was an open date, and it had worked very well the last time. It was good riddance, I think. So why not? Yeah. Thank you. No other.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll ask a question. Hi, Elinor. I'm the one who wrote and told you that the Inn at Lake Devine actually was part of my work when I worked for the Anti-Defamation League, and there was a story where someone actually told a Jewish family that they wouldn't be happy at the resort in Cape Cod. And so I wrote and told you about that. But I'm going to ask a little bit of a different question. And I love the book. It was great. When I go to the airport, I see lots and lots of bestsellers written by young, up-and-coming authors. Many, many, many people I have not read. I was curious to know what your thoughts are on some of those authors. Do you have someone you really like? I mean, I picked up a couple of them, and they're actually funny and good in your, in the same way yours are funny and great reads. There's somebody named Jennifer Close. I don't know if you guys know her, but she teaches at GW now, and I'm really loving her stuff. But do you have anybody you're reading in that sort of genre at the moment?
Well, not necessarily young, although I'm reading something. Now, I think Jennifer Close, did she write something called In 5 Years? Do you know if that was...
No.
That was someone else.
She read, her latest one, I think, is Marrying the Ketchups.
Marrying the Ketchups.
The Ketchups. There's an explanation for it.
I have my favorite author. Part of it is, I get sent a lot of books, and often it's a request to blurb it. So it's terrible to say this, but it's almost like not voluntary, like what I read. It's like I'm often obliged to read things that people send me. But I do have a book that I asked for, and it's, Marianne Cronin, and it's called, what was his name? It's Looking for Love. So-and-so is looking for love. Can you, Marianne Cronin?
You're in the right place to find out if it's...
Yeah, I mentioned it. There was a thing, I had this buy the book thing in the New York Times last weekend, and it was one of the books that I mentioned. So, Eddie, somebody is looking for love.
Yeah, Eddie Winston.
Oh, thank you. Eddie Winston, and that's a young 28 or 9 British author. And so I'm liking that very much. But, you know, I am a big fan of, well, you know, I Steve Macaulay and Tom Perrotta. And it's also, I read some historical fiction because they're friends of mine, like Christina Baker Klein is a friend, and I think she's a really good writer. But I'm really bad at that. Like, you freeze when you're asked. All writers say the same thing when you're up at the podium. I should go with a list. Yeah.
A quick question. You were in the New York Times book review last week. Are there any questions you would like them to ask you that they don't? Because we get the same questions like, what 3 people would you want for dinner, you know, et cetera.
They did vary it. They did vary it. Some were specific, you know, the thing about the estate sales. And I answered a couple that they send extra questions, and I think they get to pick a little bit. But they kept it exactly what I wrote. This is that page by the book that has, you know, they do this caricature of you. But the only thing they shouldn't have cut was there's a little anecdote about, the question was, had I ever gotten in trouble for reading a book? And I said, I hadn't, but my friend, I didn't say Patricia Timmons, but a really close friend of mine in middle school got into trouble, was suspended from the bookmobile that came to her because she'd gotten a book from a top shelf. And it turned out to be the adult book was a Jack Kerouac. And I added to that, and this was in Lowell, Massachusetts. Kerouac's birthplace. They should have kept that in. But that's can hardly complain because I was so thrilled to be asked to do that. I was thrilled and shocked, and I've been calling it the gift that keeps on giving because I'm still getting emails from people who saw it. So that's really nice. So. Anything else, but then, you know, I don't like to beg for questions. Then people start asking mercy questions. But is there anything else I can help you with?
Do you laugh while you're writing?
No. No. And I don't, if I do, what I've learned over the years, I'm always surprised at what people laugh at readings. And what I learned over the years is that just my way of describing things, not even the way I describe it, but just sort of the way I see things. Like Stacy Schiff, the wonderful biographer, she interviewed me, and my first editor, she interviewed me last week. What day is this? No, wait, Tuesday at the New York Society Library. And when we had this little talk ahead of time, she said, that line you wrote about him emptying the crumbs from the bottom of the toaster, it's the funniest line you ever wrote. So I said, to me, I thought it was like an observant thing to think of what are little things like setting the clock on the coffee maker, and it was an observant thing, but I didn't know it was funny. But if I ever feel that I'm going for a joke, I cut that line because I don't want because I don't like to read books where people are trying to be funny. So that's yes.
You mentioned that an Elinor Lipman book always has a happy ending. I've been reading romance novels since I was in high school, but over the last couple of years, romance novels have been having this sort of like huge resurgence in popularity and everything. What's your take on that? the sort of genre in general?
Yeah, I have a really happy take on that. I'll tell you why. I have a really good friend who's an editor. She's now with Simon & Schuster. She was with HarperCollins for Morrow for 29 years. And her specialty is romances, and her name is Carrie Farron, and I can't, I don't even know because the names are, but she does some other things, like she also when she was at Morrow, she published Laura Lipman, around here, Baltimore. And I have so much respect for her, and she's so happy when, for example, a new romance bookstore opened up in Harvard Square. Harvard Square.
Like everywhere now.
Yeah. And it had, at its opening, they had people lined up around the block, and 1,000 people went. And so I think, it's good for reading, and it's mainly because I think so highly of my friend, and she used to go to the Romance Writers of America, but that politically they had a problem with something, somebody, I don't know, there was some issue, and there was a big fight. So anyway, that's kind of I think it's great. I've never read, and I keep saying to her, you should recommend something that you think is really good, this will happen. Do you recommend something that you think is?
I mean, overwhelming. If you want to read like a historical Regency romance, like real throwback, I love Lisa Kleypas and
Okay.
Tessa Dare. But I'm also freezing. I read 1 or 2 romance novels a week. I love them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think it's wonderful. And one of my favorite Carrie Farron stories is that Bridgerton, right? The series, that author, that book was published, whether it was 20 years ago or 10 years ago. It was her first book of that series, and Shonda Rhimes was at a bookstore and picked it up and said, oh, I would like to do something with this. And, this author, who it was just, kind of chugging along, yeah.
It went well.
It went well. Yeah. I know. I have to do some homework. Yeah. Oh, that's good. I'm going to tell her that we had a romance story, romance question. Yeah. Yes.
So when you're talking to people like us or others, I always think of like a psychologist. When you talk to a psychologist or psychiatrist friend, that they must be observing me and analyzing me, and it always makes me. How much in this type of environment do you pull from what people say, and do you retain it? Does it?
I would say not in this environment. But I would say I do plenty of eavesdropping at the next table. I remember once it was like the blandest conversation, but I was by myself at some restaurant. I don't even know where it was, and like a simple thing. And there was 2 women talking, and she said, every single Sunday I roast a chicken, it might have been a turkey, and every day I give him a turkey or chicken sandwich for lunch. And it was just seemed to be the story of her marriage. And I never forgot that. That must have happened 20 years ago. So I would say that I don't steal lines from people, because if I ever did that, I would ask permission. But my first trouble I got into, I had a friend, and she was just the most obsequious person I'd ever met. And truly, I'd meet her in the store, and she lived in my neighborhood, and I'd ask how she was. How are you? She'd send me a thank you note. So that's the degree to which this woman was obsequious. And I was only at that time in a writing group, a writer's workshop in Brandeis, at Brandeis Adult Ed. And so the stories I wrote never would see the light of day because it was just for the workshop. So that was the first story of mine that got published. And I didn't say any much more about her, but the obsequiousness was in there. And so it got published in Yankee magazine, and that the coast was clear. And then it got republished in a Yankee magazine anthology of stories, and that was okay. And then I got a contract, Stacy Schiff, for a story collection. So I said to Viking, but I can't put that story in because it's based on, someone I know. And the legal team or something said, it's the most universal character in the book. Everybody knows somebody who apologizes too much, unnecessary house gifts, all that stuff. Well, she saw it. She saw it and sent me an invoice. Yeah. So, yeah. So, so I've never, even if I am borrowing someone's, like my friend Felice wore this very pretty red suede suit to her son's bar mitzvah. And when I wanted to put a character in a red suede suit, I asked for permission. So that's the degree to which I don't do that anymore. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. But anyway, thank you for coming on this cold, cold night.